Hello! I wanted to make this video in bed to get like a cozy feeling, you know, a chill video. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about the 24 books that I wanna read in 2024. I have started reading about 2 or 3 of them, but the rest of them I haven't started yet. So let's just get right into it. The first book I have is a book that I'm currently reading right now. I'm like on chapter 6, I believe, and that is The Song of Achilles. Like I said in my last video, I really wanted to read Madeline Miller's books ever since I read Circe, and I know she only has 2 books. So I really liked Circe, and that really made me want to read this one. And 6 chapters in, the writing of this is already way better than Circe, and I'm not quite sure which one she wrote first, actually. So yeah, not sure. But The Song of Achilles is based on Homer's The Iliad, and it is from the point of view of Patroclus. And I believe Patroclus, it says here, Patroclus is an awkward young prince exiled from his homeland after an act of shocking violence. He murdered someone, and that's not a spoiler. And so he gets exiled to the island where Achilles is the prince, I guess. And I believe from what I know, it is a forbidden love story where they basically train together, and there's some sort of romance going on. And it says here, little that the cruel fates will test them both as never before and demand a terrible sacrifice. So I'm guessing that they have to make a choice between love or duty. That's what I am assuming will happen. But everybody loves this book. So I think I'm going to love it too. And I think I'm actually gonna like it more than Circe. That's my assessment. That's my hypothesis. So yeah, that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Then the next books we have, they are on ebook. So I'm just gonna check to see their description. So one of them I already finished reading, and that is One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake. If you guys are familiar with Olivia Blake, she is the author of The Atlas 6. And in this book, One for My Enemy is basically an enemies to lovers, or like rivals to lovers book on 2 witch covens in New York City. One of them is a fully male family, a father with 3 sons, and the other one is a fully like matriarchal family with a mother and her 6 daughters. And so from there, there's a budding romance going on until she finds out, or he finds out first, that the girl that he likes is actually from his enemy's family. And then after some time, she also figures out that he is from her enemy or rivals or arch nemesis's family. The next book I have is Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism, and I love this title. The author is by Kristen Ghodsee, I think that's how you say her name. I absolutely love controversial book titles because it makes me want to read them. You know, what does she mean, women have better sex under socialism? So the whole premise of the book, I'm like halfway into it. The whole premise of the book stems from the fact that when women are empowered, when women want to work, are not forced to work, when there is some sort of social equity in society and there are social services for everyone to access, no matter your gender or your background or your abilities, it creates a more equitable society, and people from more equitable societies are more likely to marry for love, right? Because now as a woman, you are no longer forced to marry someone for money. You are no longer forced to marry someone that is the sole breadwinner of the family while you stay at home. You make enough money, your husband makes enough money. And she does acknowledge that socialism is not a perfect political system, but compared to capitalism, it is way better. That is the basic premise that she's making. She doesn't say that socialism is perfect. She says that it could definitely improve, but she says with capitalism, when people are forced to work, but also society is not equitable and there aren't enough social services or government funds or government aids for people, it creates a lot of, how do I say it? It creates a lot of chaos and it creates a lot of stress, and women are then forced to marry for money, not for love. And so at the end of the day, if you are forced to marry someone for money, if there's a lot of resentment in your marriage, if this is not a marriage of love, if this is a marriage of convenience, automatically you're not going to have great sex. And her premise is that if you marry for love, if you're not dependent on this person, whereas if you want to be with this person under this socialist society, you're more likely to have better sex as a woman. That is the basic premise of the book, and so I really wanted to read it because of that. So far so good. I'm like 3 chapters in. Yeah. So the next books I'm going to talk about, I haven't read any of them, or most of them. I have Conversations on Love by Natasha Lunn. This was gifted to me. I actually didn't know about it until somebody gifted it to me, and I realized that it's actually a pretty viral book. It is basically, it says here, a celebration of love in all of its forms, and it is a book that basically has different chapters on the different perspectives on love by different experts. And when they say love, they're not talking about romantic love. They're also talking about friendship. They're also talking about family. They're also talking about self-love. So they invited a lot of different love experts to kind of give their take on love. So some of the people that I do know that are in this book are Esther Perel. So she talks about unrealistic expectations in love. And then I think there's also Alain de Botton. And so he talks about the psychology of being alone. So I'm really excited to read that one as well. The next book we have is The Priory of the Orange Tree. And if you know me, you know that I've read this book before. So I'm gonna give it another go in 2024. I read this book last year and I got 50% into it, okay? And then I went on vacation and I completely forgot about the book when I came back, and I wasn't in my big book reading mood, okay? I wasn't in my fantasy era when I came back from vacation. And so I've just kept it on the shelf, and I said that I was gonna read it in December, and I didn't read it in December. But this year, I have to finish reading this book because I want to. So why am I so intimidated that it's a big book, you know? This is a story about, it has a kind of Game of Thrones-esque vibe to it. It is essentially a Game of Thrones, because people on this side of the earth, or like this side of the world, believe that this person should rule, and then people on this side of the world believe that this person should rule, and then that side of the world has their own political system, and some of them are at war, and some of them have dragons, and then the dragons are about to take over and rule the world. That's the best description I can give you, because I don't want to give too much away. This next book I'm going to talk to you about, I don't know much about it, but I saw, I think Jack Edwards, yeah, I saw Jack Edwards talk about this book, and it is called If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor Naga. The way he describes this book is essentially this Egyptian American woman, I believe, or man. Oh, okay, so it's like multiple points of view. Okay, there's a woman and man, but basically they are Egyptian Americans who have lived in America and then have also lived in Egypt. Now in America, they are not American enough to be considered American. So in America, they can follow their Egyptian culture and Egyptian customs, but once they go back to Egypt, their Egyptian customs are not considered Egyptian enough. So wherever they go in the world, they are never enough to be a person of that country or a person of that culture, you know? And I really related to this because as someone who has lived in a lot of different countries and has experienced a lot of different cultures, I have never really felt like I truly belonged or fit in. So this book basically has that sort of vibe, and that's why I guess it's called If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English, because no matter the language they speak, Arabic or English, they are never fully considered part of that culture. The next book we have is called Heartbreak, Houseshare, and it is by Emily Merrill. And what I heard, I forgot what YouTuber I watched this book from. I don't know, I'll just mention the name if I remember later. This girl, basically, she got dumped. And she's like in her mid or late 20s. She made like a whole heartbreak list. And I believe the list is something like what not to do or what to do. And then I think it's like what not to do. And then what happens is she moves. And she moves and shares a house with this man. And this man doesn't check any of her boxes or something like that. And then they fall in love. So there's an enemy of like there's a vibe of enemies to lovers, but I think there's also a vibe of fake dating, or the fake dating trope in this book, because I believe besides sharing a house, I believe they are also co-workers, or she is writing a romance column and her boss basically tells her to fake date this guy. So she's fake dating him until she actually falls in love with him. Then the next book we have is a Palestinian book called Minor Detail by Adania Shibli and Elizabeth Jaquette, which is the translator. Minor Detail is basically a book that starts in 1949 Palestine. One day, this Israeli soldiers capture and rape a young Palestinian woman and kill and bury her in the sand. Many years later, a woman in Ramallah becomes fascinated to the point of obsession with the minor detail of history. And the reason why she becomes obsessed with this minor detail is because on the day that she was born is the exact same day that this woman was raped by the Israeli soldiers. And so from there, she wants to uncover the history of this woman and where her family is, and kind of just understand more about this woman that she feels she has a connection with simply because she was born on the same day that that woman was raped. The next book I have is called A Fate Inked in Blood. And this book is not out yet. It's by Danielle L. Jensen. I believe this is a Norse mythology book, and that was enough to sway me to buy this book. So I'm just gonna wait until it comes out. I think it comes out in a few months. But just looking at the description, yeah, I actually don't know much about it, but Norse mythology, and I was sold. And then the next book I want to read is a book that already came out, I think, a few years ago, and it's called As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zoulfa Katouh. I believe this book is based in Syria. It is a love story. It is a story of heartbreak. I believe it is also set in the time of the Syrian conflict. And generally that is enough to make me want to read a book, even though I don't know that much about it. Yeah, I just like books set in that part of the world. Okay, this is also another book that I have kind of started this book a few times last year, but I never really got into it. And it's called It Didn't Start With You, How Inherited Trauma. I don't know what the full title is. I'll just put a picture up there. Yeah, It Didn't Start With You by Wolynn. And this book, I didn't really truly get into it because I got bored of reading it because it's a nonfiction book. So I've started listening to the ebook, and I think that's a bit better to get me into it. It's basically about how generational trauma can actually affect your behavior and affect your life much more than you give it credit for. And one of the basic premises of this book is when your grandmother is about like 4 or 5 months pregnant in the womb, the egg which you once were, or the egg that is in your mother, which is you, is already in your mother. I don't know if I'm explaining that well. You as an egg were already in your mother when your mother was 5 months old in your grandmother's womb. Maybe that's a better way of explaining it. Yeah. And so because of that, whatever happens to your grandmother can genetically impact your mother, and then your mother can then impact you. This is like a lot of epigenetics going on over here. And the next book is by my new favorite author, Ali Hazelwood. It's called Love Theoretically. I believe this is a enemies to lovers book on these students in MIT. I don't think they're students. I think they are professors. Okay, one teaches theoretical physics and the other one teaches what is it? Oh, okay. So one is a theoretical physicist and the other one is an experimental physicist. And so they kind of hate each other. But the guy that she hates is on the hiring committee to hire her to MIT. So that, can't wait to read that book. Next, we have the sequel to A House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. It's called Somewhere Beyond the Sea. So Somewhere Beyond the Sea is, it focuses on the main characters of the first book, and it kind of goes on to talk about their lives in this orphanage and what happens once they have been approved to live in that orphanage and how they can now be like a family unit. I believe the conflict in this story is that the owner of the orphanage, Arthur, is supposed to make a statement on his past, on what he really is, because he's a phoenix. So there's that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I like the first book, so I'm pretty sure I'm gonna like the second book. The next book we have is called Maya's Laws of Love by Alina, Khawaja, and I am so excited to read this book. I don't know if this is out yet. I saw it in a video by Jenedy. I think that's her name. Yeah, I'll put her YouTube link in my video, or like her YouTube username. Okay. So Maya is basically a girl, I think she's like an Indian American or Indian Canadian girl who has gone through a lot of, what's the word? She's been unlucky in her love life, okay? And she's been heartbroken, I guess, a few different times, dumped a few different times. And so she's sick of it. And she's like, you know what? I'm gonna make these laws of love, and people have to meet my expectations, then I'm gonna marry them. And so she decides to then get this arranged marriage to this guy in India that she's never met before. The whole wedding has been planned, and on her flight from Canada to India, who does she sit next to? She sits next to this guy that basically becomes her love interest, and she's pissed because she's like, he doesn't meet any of my laws of love, and yet I feel an intensely deep connection and chemistry with him, but here I am going to marry someone that I don't even know. So I'm really excited to read this one. Okay, the next book we have is called Blood Over Bright Haven by ML Wang. This one was recommended by, why do I keep forgetting all of these YouTubers' names? Again, I'll put her username up there, but a lot of YouTubers have recommended Blood Over Bright Haven, and I believe it is a book of this mage. And in this magic system, women find it really difficult to become mages. I believe they only have a chance once every 10 years, but if you succeed, then it opens doors for other females to be mages as well. And so the main character, I believe her name is Sayona. Yeah, the main character, Sayona, has a chance to become a mage, and she's trying her best to finally climb up the ranks and, you know, pass this test. And I believe this is it is a standalone dark academia brimming with mystery, tragedy, and damning echoes of the past. This is perfect for fans of Lee Bardugo, V.E. Schwab, and Full Metal Alchemist, which perfect for me. The next book I have is going to be my first ever Brandon Sanderson book that I'm reading in 2024 ever, okay? And it's called Tress of the Emerald Sea. It is part of the Cosmere universe. I have no idea what that is. All I know is everybody who reads Brando Sando loves him. And I want to be part of the Brandon Sanderson club, okay? And he wrote this book for his wife. He wasn't even initially interested on planning it. And his wife was like, no, this is really good. You gotta publish this. So yeah, I believe this is about Tress, who has only lived on her island her whole life. And suddenly his father takes him on a voyage to find a bride, and disaster strikes. He must stow away on a ship and seek the sorceress. And then throughout the oceans where pirates are abound, Tress leaves her simple life behind and makes her own place sailing the sea. So I don't know, I think it might be cozy fantasy. I actually have no idea, but I cannot wait to read this book. Then the next book that I'm gonna read this year is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I heard this is the coziest fantasy you can read. I haven't read a lot of cozy fantasy. A lot of the fantasy that I read is for the high stakes. So I'm actually not sure how I'm gonna like this one. But you know, you never know. You might read something and change your mind. So I'm hoping I change my mind when I read this. Emily Wilde is basically a curmudgeonly professor who goes to a small town to study the fairies in that town. And when she gets there, one of her expert witnesses or like expert interviewees about the fairies in that town, she suspects that he might actually be a fairy himself. And I believe they kind of fall in love, and she uncovers the secret behind, or like the truth behind him. Yeah, that's enough to make me want to read it. Even the cover itself is beautiful. Next we have Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates. This is a non-fiction book, and it is basically, it says, the blurb says, the first comprehensive undercover look at the terrorist movement no one is talking about. Men Who Hate Women examine the rise of secret extremist communities who despise women and traces the roots of misogyny across a complex spiderweb of groups. So there are eye-opening interviews with former members of these communities and academics studying this movement. So I guess this is a real thing going on. I guess there are secret societies of men who hate women that try to, you know, put us at a disadvantage. I don't know, but it looked interesting and I wanted to give it a go. The next book I'm going to read this year is called Almond, and this is a Korean book by Son Won-pyung. So it's been translated to English. Typically, I don't really like translated books. Like a lot of the Japanese books I don't really like, but so far Korean literature that has been translated has been pretty okay for me. Basic premise of Almond is how everybody's brains has, I think it's the amygdala, and the amygdala is like two almond-shaped neurons located deep in the brain, and it is responsible for emotions like fear or anger. But in the main character, Yoonjae, he was born with a brain condition where his amygdala is basically broken or damaged, and so that's why the book is called Almond. The next book I want to read this year is James Baldwin. I have wanted to read this man's works for a really long time. And when I read Susan Abdulhawa's book Against the Loveless World, she mentions a lot of quotes from James Baldwin. So I'm gonna start with The Fire next time. I have no idea what this book is about, but I do know that a lot of his books are an exploration of race and love and what it means to be a part of a political movement, or, you know, just, yeah. I don't know much about it. It says here, this is the famous study of the Black problem in America. It's powerful, haunting, and prophetic. So I don't know. He might be my favorite author this year. I have no idea. Then we have a book that I have wanted to read for so long, and now that I've kind of read Priory of the Orange Tree, now I'm kind of brave to start my big book fantasy, you know, journey. And it's called Sendin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. This is, I believe, Peru's project. She always talks about this book. She's in love with this book. So I want to give it a go because of her. This is how she describes the book. So I'm just going to relay what she says in her videos, okay? In this book, the main character and his wife goes to the Tower of Babel, the greatest marvel in the world. And every level of this tower has a different sort of society, a different sort of world going on. And it's very, very easy to get lost in this tower. And lo and behold, the main character's wife gets lost there. By the way, this is their honeymoon. So she gets lost, and this whole book, I believe, is a story of him trying to find his wife again in the tower, and the journey he goes through and the challenges he goes through to be reunited with his newlywed wife. Then we have The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakrabarti, okay? This is Amina al-Sirafi should be content, and after a storied and scandalous career as one of the most notorious pirates, she's survived backstabbing rogues, vengeful merchants, and an actual demon to peacefully retire with her family. And she's a mother, okay? But when she's tracked down by one of her former crewmen, she's offered a job that no bandit could refuse, to retrieve her comrade's kidnapped daughter for a kingly sum. And everybody who's read this book loves this book. So say less. And the next book I'm gonna read this year is another nonfiction book. It is by Salman Rushdie. It's called Knife: Meditations After an Attempted Murder. So apparently, I didn't know this, but Salman Rushdie, there was a fatwa ordered against him, so there was a murder attempt on him. I believe the murder attempt was in 2022, and he is now going to talk about the details of this traumatic event. The book is coming out in a few months, I believe, or at the end of the year. I've never read any Salman Rushdie books before, but I've read a lot of his quotes, so I know that his writing is going to be filled with a lot of prose. It's going to be lyrical. It's going to be very gripping. So I can't wait to read this. And the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video that I want to read this year is called Lemon Tree. Now, this one is based in Palestine. It is about Bashir, a 25-year-old who journeyed to Israel with the goal of seeing the beloved old stone house with the lemon tree behind it. To his surprise, he found the house was greeted by Dalia, an Ashkenazi Jew. On the stoop of their shared home, Dalia and Bashir began a rare friendship, and this has been tested over the next 35 years. And this is based on extensive research, springing from a documentary that was aired on NPR. Sandy Tolan brings the Israeli-Palestinian conflict down to its most human level, suggesting that even amid the bleakest political realities, there exist stories of hope and reconciliation. Now, I love stories that merge the Israelis and the Palestinians together. The horrors going on there is unspeakable. But the best I can do is read about it, educate myself about it, and I absolutely love stories that intertwine the human lives of Palestinians and Israelis together. Because I know that Susan Abdul Hawa did talk about some of these instances in her first book, Mornings in Janine, as well. So yeah, I can't wait to read Lemon Tree by Sandy Tolan. I guess this is based on a real story. But yeah. That pretty much brings it to the end of my video. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked my content. Please recommend more book ideas for me to talk about in the future. That's pretty much it from me. Thank you so much. Bye.